"Ma'am," I said, "hands where I can see them. Now." The voice cut through the autumn air like a blade. Officer Derek Paulson's hand rested on his belt, fingers drumming near his holster. His partner, Officer James Kendrick, had already positioned himself behind the elderly woman, blocking her path back to her sedan. She stood very still in the parking lot of Riverside Plaza, her cloth shopping bags at her feet, one hand still holding her car keys. The fluorescent lights from the grocery store cast harsh shadows across her face. She was 72 years old. Her name was Eleanor Price. "Officers," she said quietly, her voice steady, despite the tremor in her hands. "I think there's been some misunderstanding." "License and registration," Paulson snapped, ignoring her words entirely, "and step away from the vehicle." Eleanor's mind raced, trying to understand what was happening. She had just finished her weekly shopping, the same route she'd taken every Thursday evening for the past 11 years, ever since her husband James had died, and she'd moved into the small house on Oakwood Drive. She had committed no crime. She had broken no law. She had simply bought groceries, the same way she did every single week. "My purse is in the car," she explained, gesturing slowly toward the driver's seat. "May I?" "Don't move," Kendrick barked from behind her. She froze. A small crowd had begun to gather near the store entrance. A teenage boy in a red hoodie held up his phone, recording. An older couple stood near their car, whispering to each other, uncertain whether to intervene. A young mother pushed her cart past quickly, pulling her daughter close, not wanting to get involved. Most simply watched, uncomfortable, unwilling to step forward. "We got a report of a woman matching your description involved in a shoplifting incident," Paulson said, moving closer. His breath smelled like coffee and something Eleanor couldn't identify. "You're going to cooperate, or this is going to go badly for you." Eleanor felt her heart hammering in her chest. Shoplifting. The word hung in the air, absurd and humiliating. She had never stolen anything in her life. Not a candy bar as a child, not a pen from her classroom, not a single thing in 72 years. "I have my receipt," she said carefully, reaching slowly toward one of the bags at her feet. "I said don't move." Paulson's hand shot out and grabbed her wrist, twisting it sharply behind her back. The keys clattered to the pavement. Pain exploded up Eleanor's arm, sharp, bright, shocking. She gasped, and the sound that came out was small and wounded. "Please," she said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "You're hurting me. Turn around, hands behind your back." She complied, moving as slowly as her arthritic joints would allow. Her left knee, the one she'd had surgery on 3 years ago, protested as she shifted her weight. The cold metal of handcuffs bit into her wrists, tighter than necessary, the ratcheting sound echoing in the parking lot. She could feel Kendrick's hands patting her down roughly, impersonally, as though she were a suspect in some violent crime, rather than a grandmother who'd just bought milk and bread. "Check the bags," Paulson ordered. Kendrick dumped the contents of her shopping bags onto the hood of her car. A carton of eggs cracked open, yolk spreading across the dark metal. A loaf of whole wheat bread, 4 bananas, a small container of plain yogurt, chicken breast wrapped in white butcher paper, a bottle of orange juice, a head of lettuce, and beneath it all, neatly folded, the receipt from checkout lane 4, time-stamped 7:43 p.m. Total, $47.62. There was a long pause. Kendrick picked up the receipt, his eyes scanning the itemized list. He looked at the groceries spread across the hood. Everything matched. "So?" he said, his voice uncertain now. "So she paid for this stuff," Paulson replied, his tone flat, defensive. "Doesn't mean she didn't take something else." Eleanor closed her eyes. The realization settled over her like a heavy blanket. This was not about shoplifting. It had never been about shoplifting. This was about something else entirely. Something she'd lived with her entire life. Something she'd hoped might have changed, but never really had. "Officers, please," She tried again, keeping her voice as calm and respectful as possible. You can call the store manager. You can check the security cameras. I haven't done anything wrong. I shop here every Thursday evening. You can ask anyone. You match the description we were given. Paulson cut her off. Black female, 70 to 75 years old. Gray hair, blue jacket. That's you. Eleanor wanted to laugh or cry. She didn't know which. In a town where the population was 43% black, where dozens of elderly women shopped at this very store every single day, matching a description meant nothing. It was an excuse, a justification for what they'd already decided, a lie they told themselves to sleep at night. The teenager with the phone had moved closer. Yo, this is messed up, he said loudly. She's like somebody's grandma. Why y'all got her in cuffs? Step back, Kendrick warned. This is police business. It's police harassment, the boy shot back. Step back, or you're next. The boy hesitated, then retreated, but he kept filming. What now? Kendrick asked Paulson quietly. Paulson looked around at the growing crowd, at the phones recording every second. He should have let her go. Any reasonable officer would have apologized, uncuffed her, handed back her keys, and walked away. The situation was salvageable. There was still time to make it right. Instead, he doubled down. We're taking her in for questioning. Eleanor felt the ground shift beneath her feet. But I haven't. You can explain yourself at the station, Paulson said, gripping her upper arm and steering her toward the patrol car. Let's go. As they walked her across the parking lot, Eleanor caught sight of her reflection in a car window. A small, elderly woman in handcuffs, being led away by two officers who towered over her. She looked fragile, guilty, dangerous. She looked like everything she was not. The back door of the patrol car opened, and Paulson placed his hand on top of her head, pushing her down into the seat. The door slammed shut with a finality that made her stomach turn. Through the window, she could see people watching. Some looked angry. Some looked sad. Most looked away, uncomfortable witnesses to something they didn't understand and didn't want to be part of. The patrol car pulled out of the parking lot, leaving her groceries scattered across the hood of her sedan, the broken eggs congealing in the cool evening air. The back of the patrol car smelled like disinfectant, and old sweat, and something sharp Eleanor couldn't identify. She sat with her hands still cuffed behind her, the metal digging into the soft flesh of her wrists. Every bump in the road sent a jolt of pain through her shoulders. Her rotator cuff, damaged years ago in a fall, burned with each movement. She focused on breathing, slow, steady breaths, the way she used to coach her children when they were scared. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Count to 4. You're okay. You're going to be okay. But she didn't feel okay. Through the metal grate separating the back seat from the front, she could hear Paulson and Kendrick talking in low voices. Think she's really clean? Kendrick asked. Who cares? We brought her in. Let processing figure it out, Paulson replied. Man, I don't know. That receipt looked legit, Kendrick said. Then she should have cooperated from the start, Paulson said. Didn't have to escalate. Eleanor almost laughed at that. She had escalated? She had done nothing but comply. She had moved slowly, spoken respectfully, explained herself clearly, and still, she was in handcuffs. Don't give them a reason, she told herself. Stay calm, stay quiet. This will pass. But she knew, deep in the core of her being, that something had already been set in motion that could not easily be undone. At the precinct, she was led through a side entrance, away from the main lobby where people might see. The processing room was cold, sterile, lit by buzzing fluorescent tubes that made everything look washed out and lifeless. A female officer, young, blonde, bored, sat at a desk with a computer and a stack of forms. Name, the officer said without looking up. Eleanor Marie Price. Date of birth: March 14th, 1953. Address: Eleanor recited her address, her phone number, her emergency contact information. The questions were routine, mechanical, delivered without interest or empathy. She was processed like a package, labeled and filed away. "Any medical conditions we should know about?" the officer asked, reading from a form. "High blood pressure," Eleanor said softly. "Arthritis in both hands and both knees. I take medication for my blood pressure, lisinopril, 10 milligrams, and I'm supposed to take it before bed. I also have a prescription for—" "Yeah, okay." The officer checked a box and moved on. "Any history of mental illness?" "No." "Alcohol or drug use?" "No." "Previous arrests?" "No." The officer looked up for the first time, her expression mildly surprised. "Never?" "Never." The officer shrugged and went back to her form. Eleanor felt a flicker of hope. Surely this would matter. Surely someone would look at her record, spotless, clean, decades of law-abiding existence, and realize this was a mistake. They took her fingerprints. The ink was cold and sticky. They took her photograph, front and side, the flash leaving spots in her vision. They took her purse, her keys, her watch, her wedding ring, the simple gold band James had placed on her finger 49 years ago, still warm from her skin. "You'll get these back when you're released," the blonde officer said, sealing everything in a plastic bag. When she was released, not if. That was something at least. They placed her in a holding cell. Not a room. Not an office. A cell. Concrete floor, metal bench bolted to the wall, a toilet in the corner with no seat, no privacy, just open and exposed. The door clanged shut with a sound that reverberated in Eleanor's chest. She sat down carefully on the bench, her body aching from the rough handling, the cuffs, the adrenaline that had flooded her system and left her feeling hollowed out and shaky. For the first time since this nightmare began, she allowed herself to feel the full weight of it. She was 72 years old. She had worked for 37 years as an elementary school teacher. Second grade, mostly. She had taught hundreds of children to read, to write, to treat each other with kindness. She had stayed late for parent conferences, arrived early to prepare lessons, spent her own money on supplies when the school budget ran dry. She had raised 3 children on her own after her husband passed. Maya, her oldest, now a police chief. Marcus, her middle child, a civil engineer in Atlanta. Teresa, her baby, a nurse at the county hospital. She had never missed a parent-teacher conference, never missed a church service, never missed a vote. She had lived her entire life with her head up and her conscience clear. And now she was in a cage. The hours crawled by. No one came to check on her, no one brought water, no one explained what was happening or when she might be released. The fluorescent lights never dimmed, burning with a constant artificial brightness that made it impossible to tell whether it was 8 p.m. or midnight or 3 in the morning. Her blood pressure medication was in her purse, locked away in some property room. She could feel her heartbeat in her temples, heavy and irregular. Her wrists throbbed where the handcuffs had bitten into them. Her shoulder ached with a deep grinding pain that made it hard to breathe. She tried to pray, but the words wouldn't come. She tried to think of something comforting, her garden, her grandchildren, Sunday dinners with her family. But her mind kept circling back to the parking lot, to the sound of the handcuffs, to the way Paulson had looked at her with such casual contempt. At some point, she couldn't say when, she heard voices in the hallway outside her cell. Laughter. The casual banter of officers ending their shift, talking about weekend plans, about a football game, about where to grab a beer. "Man, I'm starving," one voice said. "There's that taco place on 5th. Nah, it closes at 10. What about Mario's?" "Yeah, Mario's is good." Their voices faded as they walked away, leaving Eleanor alone in the silence. They had forgotten her. Or worse, they simply didn't care. Eleanor thought about her daughter, Maya, strong, brilliant, stubborn Maya, who had fought her way through the police academy 23 years ago when women like her were still a rarity, who had endured the jokes, the doubts, the casual misogyny, and the less casual racism, who had risen through the ranks with a combination of relentless work ethic and unshakable integrity, who now led a department 3 hours north in Clayton City, one of the few black female police chiefs in the entire state. Maya, who called every Sunday without fail. Maya, who still visited on holidays and brought flowers to her father's grave. Maya, who had once arrested a fellow officer for excessive force and faced down a union that wanted her fired for it. Maya, who would be furious if she knew what was happening right now. Eleanor had always told her children, pick your battles. Not every slight is worth the fight. Sometimes you endure. Sometimes you let it go. Sometimes surviving with dignity is enough. But as she sat in that cell, her wrists bruised, her dignity stripped away, her body aching and her heart heavy, Eleanor Price made a decision. This was a battle worth fighting, not just for herself, but for every person who had sat in a cell like this one, forgotten and voiceless. For every elderly woman stopped in a parking lot for matching a description. For every person who didn't have someone to call, who couldn't fight back, who would simply disappear into a system that didn't see them as human. She would not disappear. She would not be forgotten. She would call her daughter, and then she would let the chips fall where they may. It was nearly midnight when Officer Kendrick finally appeared at the cell door, looking annoyed and tired. You get one phone call, he said, unlocking the door with a jangle of keys. Make it quick. I want to go home. He led her down a narrow hallway to a small room with a metal desk and an old landline phone, the kind with a rotary dial that seemed like a relic from another era. Eleanor's hands shook as she picked up the receiver. Her fingers felt stiff and swollen. Her mind felt clouded, exhausted, fuzzy around the edges. She knew Maya's number by heart, had known it for years, even as it changed with each promotion, each transfer, each step up the ladder. She dialed carefully, willing her fingers to cooperate. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then a voice answered, alert despite the late hour. Chief Price. Eleanor's throat tightened. Hearing her daughter's voice, so strong, so certain, so present, nearly broke her. Maya, she said quietly, it's Mom. There was a pause, barely a heartbeat. Then, Mom, what's wrong? Are you okay? The concern in Maya's voice, the instant shift from professional to personal, made Eleanor's eyes burn with unshed tears. I'm at the police station, in Riverside. Her voice cracked. She steadied herself, took a breath. I need you. What happened? Maya's tone shifted immediately. All business now, but Eleanor could hear the fury beneath it, coiled and controlled. Are you hurt? I'm okay. But Maya, Eleanor glanced at Kendrick, who was leaning against the doorframe, watching her with barely concealed impatience. They arrested me. They said I was shoplifting, but I wasn't. I tried to tell them, but they wouldn't listen. And they put me in handcuffs, and Mom. Maya's voice was calm, controlled, but Eleanor could hear the steel in it. Listen to me. Don't say anything else. Not to anyone. Do you understand? Not a word. I'm on my way. I'll be there in 3 hours. Okay, Eleanor whispered. And Mom, you're going to be fine. I promise you. You're going to be fine. The line went dead. Kendrick gestured impatiently toward the hallway. Done? Let's go. Back in the cell, Eleanor sat down on the metal bench and closed her eyes. Her heart was racing, but for the first time since this ordeal began, she felt something other than fear. She felt hope, and she felt something else too. something fierce and bright and unshakable. She felt the presence of her daughter, already in motion, already coming for her. Maya would be here in 3 hours, and when she arrived, everything would change. Maya Price ended the call and sat perfectly still for 10 seconds, her phone still in her hand. Then she was moving. She threw on jeans, boots, a dark blazer over a simple t-shirt. No uniform, no badge displayed. She wanted to arrive as a daughter first, a police chief second. She grabbed her wallet, her keys, and her service weapon, a habit, a precaution, a reminder of who she was. Her husband, David, appeared in the bedroom doorway, bleary-eyed and concerned. "What's wrong?" "It's Mom. I have to go." "Is she okay?" "No, she's been arrested." David blinked, trying to process the absurdity of that statement. Eleanor Price, arrested? It was like saying the sun had been detained for shining too brightly. "What? For what?" "But I'm going to find out." Maya kissed him quickly, grabbed her car keys, and was out the door before he could say another word. The drive from Clayton City to Riverside was normally 3 hours. Maya made it in 2.5. She drove through the night, with her hands tight on the wheel, her mind running through scenarios, laws, procedures. She thought about her mother, gentle, patient Eleanor, who had never so much as raised her voice in anger. She thought about the kind of officers who would arrest a 72-year-old woman and leave her in a cell for hours without explanation. And she thought about justice. Not revenge, not retribution, but accountability, consequences, the kind of reckoning that makes people think twice before they abuse their power. She had joined the force 23 years ago because she believed in the possibility of good policing. She had stayed because she believed she could make a difference from the inside. She had risen through the ranks by doing the work no one else wanted to do, investigating corruption, implementing reforms, holding officers accountable, even when it made her unpopular. It had cost her friendships, it had earned her enemies, but it had also earned her respect, grudging though it sometimes was. And now those years of work, those battles fought and won, would serve a purpose she'd never anticipated. They would help her protect her mother. At 3:17 a.m., Maya pulled into the parking lot of the Riverside Police Department. The building was old, squat, built in the 70s and never properly updated. A single patrol car sat in the lot, its engine running, exhaust visible in the cold night air. Maya took a breath, composed herself, and walked through the front entrance. The lobby was fluorescent bright and empty, except for the officer on duty. Sergeant Tom Howell sat at the front desk, a heavy-set man in his 50s with thinning gray hair and reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. He was scrolling through his phone, half watching a small TV mounted in the corner showing a late-night talk show. He glanced up as Maya entered, his expression shifting from boredom to mild curiosity. "Help you?" he asked, barely looking at her. "I'm here to see Eleanor Price," Maya said evenly, her voice calm and professional. "She's being held in your facility." Howell frowned, setting down his phone. "Visiting hours are 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. on weekdays." "I'm not visiting," Maya interrupted, her tone still calm but with an edge now. "I'm her daughter, and I'm also Police Chief Maya Price from Clayton PD. So let me rephrase. I need to see Eleanor Price. Now." Howell blinked. He sat up straighter, suddenly much more awake. Let me get the watch commander." He picked up the desk phone and dialed an extension, speaking in low, urgent tones. Maya stood in the lobby, her arms crossed, her expression neutral. She could feel the weight of the building around her, the cells somewhere in back, the processing rooms, the offices where decisions were made and reports were filed and people's lives were catalogued and filed away. Somewhere in this building, her mother was sitting in a cell. That thought made her jaw tighten. 5 minutes later, Lieutenant Gary Simmons appeared, looking flustered and half awake. He was a 20-year veteran, mid-50s, with thinning hair and a gut that strained against his uniform shirt. His tie was loosened, his shirt wrinkled. He'd clearly been dozing in his office. "Chief Price," he said, extending his hand with a forced smile. Maya didn't take it. I wasn't aware we had someone from Clayton PD coming down tonight." "You have my mother in a holding cell," Maya said, her voice cold and precise. Each word was measured, deliberate. "I want to see her. I want to see the arrest report. I want to see the body cam footage. And I want to know why a 72-year-old woman with no criminal record was detained for," she glanced at her watch, "over 5 hours now, without medical attention, without her medication, and without legal representation." Simmons paled visibly. "I'm sure there's been some. Let me just pull up the file." He hurried back toward his office, gesturing for Maya to follow. She did, her boots echoing on the linoleum floor. Other officers were starting to appear now, drawn by the commotion. A young patrolman poked his head out of the break room. A detective paused in the hallway, coffee cup in hand. Word was spreading fast. "Here for the old lady in holding." Simmons' office was small and cluttered, the desk piled with reports and files and empty coffee cups. He sat down at his computer and pulled up the arrest record, his hands shaking slightly as he typed. "Okay, the officers on scene responded to a call from Riverside Plaza about a shoplifting report," he began, reading from the screen. "Subject, Miss Price, matched the description provided by the store manager. Officers Paulson and Kendrick detained the subject for questioning." "Her name is Eleanor Price," Maya cut in sharply. "Not subject, not detainee. Eleanor Price. Use her name." Simmons swallowed. "Right, Eleanor Price. She was detained for questioning regarding possible theft." "And what evidence did they have that she had stolen anything?" "Well, she matched the description." "Which was what exactly?" Simmons scanned the report. "Black, female, elderly, approximately 70 to 75 years old, gray hair, wearing a blue jacket." Maya stared at him. "That describes half the women over 60 in this town. That's not probable cause. That's barely even reasonable suspicion. The officers acted in good faith." "Did they recover any stolen merchandise?" "No, but did they find any evidence of theft, any unpaid items, any concealed goods, anything that would justify detaining a senior citizen in a grocery store parking lot?" "No." "Then why the hell was she arrested?" Simmons shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "She wasn't technically arrested. She was detained for questioning." Maya leaned forward, her hands flat on his desk. "Lieutenant, let me explain something to you. When you put handcuffs on someone, when you fingerprint them, when you take their photograph and lock them in a cell, that is an arrest. I don't care what language you use in your report. In the eyes of the law, and in the eyes of any competent attorney, that is an arrest. And unless you have probable cause, actual articulable probable cause, it's also a violation of her Fourth Amendment rights." There was a long, heavy silence. Simmons opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked down at the report, then back up at Maya. "I want to see the body cam footage," Maya said. "Right now." 20 minutes later, Maya sat in a small conference room watching the body cam footage on a laptop. Lieutenant Simmons stood beside her, along with Captain Angela Reyes from Internal Affairs, who had been called in as soon as word reached her that a police chief from another jurisdiction was in the building demanding answers. The video started with Paulson and Kendrick exiting their patrol car in the Riverside Plaza parking lot. The timestamp read 7:51 p.m. "There she is," Paulson's voice said on the recording. "Blue jacket." The camera approached Eleanor from behind. She was loading grocery bags into her car, moving slowly, carefully. She didn't look suspicious. She looked like someone's grandmother. "Ma'am, I need you to step away from the vehicle." Eleanor turned, surprised. Officers, is something wrong? Step away from the vehicle. Hands where I can see them. Maya watched her mother's face change from confusion to fear. She watched her comply immediately, setting down her bags, raising her hands slowly. I think there's been some misunderstanding, Eleanor said on the video. License and registration. My purse is in the car. May I? Don't move. Maya watched Paulson grab her mother's wrist, watched Eleanor gasp in pain, watched the keys fall to the ground. She watched her mother be handcuffed, searched, humiliated in front of a growing crowd of onlookers. She watched Kendrick dump the groceries on the hood of the car, watched him pick up the receipt. And then she heard Paulson say it. Doesn't mean she didn't take something else. Even though he was looking at proof, clear, indisputable proof, that Eleanor had paid for her items, he pushed forward anyway. Maya felt a cold fury settling in her chest. The video continued. Eleanor being led to the patrol car. Eleanor sitting in the back seat, her face stoic, her eyes wet. The drive to the station, the processing, the cell door closing. The video ended. Maya sat back in her chair. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute certainty. This is racial profiling. This is excessive use of force against a non-threatening senior citizen. This is false arrest. And this is a clear violation of her civil rights. She looked at Simmons. Where are Officers Paulson and Kendrick right now? They went off duty about an hour ago. Call them back. I want them here. Chief Price, I'm not asking, Lieutenant. Call them back. And while you're at it, I want copies of all reports related to this incident. I want the name of whoever called in the shoplifting report. I want to speak to the store manager, and I want to see my mother, right now. Simmons looked at Captain Reyes, who nodded grimly. Take her to see Ms. Price, Reyes said. I'll start pulling the files. When the cell door opened, Eleanor looked up from where she sat on the metal bench. For a moment, mother and daughter simply stared at each other. Eleanor's eyes were red, her face drawn with exhaustion. Her wrists bore dark bruises where the handcuffs had bitten into her skin. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the harsh lights and the concrete walls. But when she saw Maya, something shifted in her expression. Relief, hope, love. Then Maya stepped inside the cell, and Eleanor rose, slowly, painfully, her knee protesting, and pulled her into an embrace. I'm okay, Eleanor whispered into her daughter's shoulder. I'm okay. Maya held her mother carefully, mindful of her injuries, fighting back the rage that threatened to overwhelm her professional composure. She could feel her mother trembling slightly, could feel the rapid beat of her heart. I'm here now, Maya said quietly. I'm here, and I'm going to make this right. She held Eleanor at arm's length, examining her face, her wrists, the way she winced when she moved her left shoulder. Her eyes catalogued every injury, every bruise, every sign of mistreatment. This wasn't just her mother. This was evidence. This was documentation of what had been done. Did they give you your medication? Maya asked. Eleanor shook her head. They asked about it during processing, but no one brought it. Maya's jaw tightened. Did they offer you water? Food? No. Did anyone check on you? Explain what was happening? No. They just left me here. Maya pulled out her phone and started taking photographs. Eleanor's wrists, her face, the cell itself, every detail documented, preserved. Mom, I need you to tell me everything that happened. From the beginning. Eleanor recounted the story, the shopping trip, the stop in the parking lot, the refusal to look at her receipt, the rough handling, the hours in the cell. She spoke quietly, her voice steady, despite the emotion behind it. She was a teacher, after all. She knew how to present facts clearly. When she finished, Maya was silent for a long moment. We're leaving, she said finally. Right now. They said I had to. You don't have to do anything. You're being released immediately. Maya's voice was firm, absolute. They have no grounds to hold you. They never did. But, Mom, trust me. Eleanor nodded. She did trust her, completely. Maya stepped out of the cell and found Lieutenant Simmons hovering anxiously in the hallway. Release her, Maya said. Process the paperwork and return her belongings, now. Chief Price, I need to consult with... Lieutenant Simmons, let me be very clear. You are currently holding my mother without probable cause, without charges, and without justification. Every minute she remains in that cell is another count of false imprisonment. Every minute is more ammunition for the civil rights lawsuit that is absolutely going to follow this disaster. So unless you want to personally join Officers Paulson and Kendrick in that lawsuit, I suggest you release her. Immediately. Simmons looked like he wanted to argue. Then he looked at Eleanor, small and elderly and clearly no threat to anyone, and something in him seemed to break. I'll process the release, he said quietly. 20 minutes later, Eleanor's belongings were returned to her. Her purse, her keys, her watch, her wedding ring, which she slipped back onto her finger with a small, grateful sigh. Maya guided her mother out of the building and into the cool pre-dawn air. The sky was just beginning to lighten in the east, a pale gray bleeding into the darkness. They sat in Maya's SUV for a moment in silence. Do you want to go home? Maya asked gently. Eleanor looked at her daughter. Not yet. I need you to do something for me first. Anything. I need you to make sure this doesn't happen to someone else. Eleanor's voice was quiet, but firm. Someone who doesn't have a daughter who's a police chief. Someone who can't fight back. I need you to make sure they can't just forget about people. Lock them away and pretend they don't exist. Maya reached over and took her mother's hand. I will, she promised. I swear to you, I will. By 9 a.m., the Riverside Police Department was in full crisis mode. Maya had not gone home. She had taken her mother to the hospital to be examined and treated, then to a hotel where Eleanor could rest and recover, and then she had returned to the precinct, accompanied now by her department's senior legal advisor and a representative from the State Police Oversight Board. She was no longer operating as a concerned daughter. She was operating as a law enforcement professional documenting a pattern of misconduct. The body cam footage had been pulled and reviewed. The incident report had been analyzed and found wanting. The store manager from Riverside Plaza had been contacted at home and brought in for an interview. His statement was damning. I called in about a possible shoplifter, he said, sitting nervously in the conference room. White woman, maybe 40, dark hair, wearing jeans and a black hoodie. She left the store with a cart full of stuff and no receipt. I never said anything about an elderly black woman. I don't know where they got that. The description had been changed somewhere between the store manager's call and the dispatcher's message to Paulson and Kendrick. Whether it was deliberate or accidental, the result was the same. Eleanor had been stopped for a crime someone else may have committed, based on a description that didn't match her at all. Internal Affairs was now fully involved. Captain Reyes had set up shop in a spare office and was methodically going through every report, every communication, every piece of documentation related to the arrest. Officers Paulson and Kendrick had been called back in. They sat in separate interview rooms, waiting to be questioned. Maya sat in the observation room, watching through the one-way glass, as Captain Reyes interviewed Kendrick first. Walk me through the stop, Reyes said. From the moment you arrived on scene. Kendrick looked uncomfortable. We got a call about a possible shoplifter at Riverside Plaza. Dispatch gave us a description. When we arrived, we saw a woman matching that description loading groceries into her car. What was the description? Black female, elderly, gray hair, blue jacket. And Miss Price matched that description? Yes. Did you consider that the description might apply to multiple people? Kendrick hesitated. I mean, yeah, I guess, but we had to follow up on the call. So you approached her. Then what? Officer Paulson asked for her license and registration. She seemed, I don't know, nervous, like she was hiding something. Did she comply with your requests? Eventually, she said her purse was in the car. And did you allow her to retrieve it? Another hesitation. We secured her first. By secured, you mean handcuffed? Yes. Why did you feel that was necessary? Officer Paulson made the call. He's the senior officer. But you agreed with the decision? Kendrick looked away. At the time, yeah. I mean, we didn't know who she was, or what she might do. She was a 72-year-old woman loading groceries, Reyes said flatly. What exactly did you think she might do? I don't know. Run? Fight? I don't know. Did she resist at any point? No. Did she make any threatening gestures? No. Did she raise her voice, use profanity, or behave in any way that suggested aggression? No. So you handcuffed a compliant, elderly woman who posed no threat to you or to anyone else. Is that accurate? Kendrick said nothing. And when you checked her groceries and found a receipt proving she'd paid for everything, what did you do? Officer Paulson said she could have taken other items. Did you have any evidence of that? No. Did you search her, her car? We searched her. We didn't search the car. Why not? I don't know. Paulson said to bring her in for questioning. Did you at any point consider that you might be wrong, that you might have stopped the wrong person? Kendrick looked down at his hands. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. Yeah, I thought maybe we should let her go. But Paulson what? He didn't want to admit we screwed up. The room fell silent. Reyes made a note on her pad. Thank you, Officer Kendrick. You're dismissed. Officer Derek Paulson's interview was next. He sat in the chair across from Captain Reyes with his arms crossed, his expression defensive. I did everything by the book, he said before Reyes could even ask a question. We had a report. We followed up. She matched the description. The description from the store manager was for a white woman in her 40s, Reyes said calmly, not a black woman in her 70s. Paulson blinked. That's not what dispatch told us. I know. We're looking into that. But let's focus on your actions. When you approached Miss Price, what did you observe? A woman matching the description we'd been given. Did she appear to be engaged in any criminal activity? She was acting nervous. How? She was, I don't know, fidgety, wouldn't look me in the eye. Or she was frightened because 2 police officers approached her aggressively in a parking lot, Reyes suggested. Paulson's jaw tightened. I wasn't aggressive. You grabbed her wrist and twisted it behind her back. That left bruising. She wasn't complying. She was reaching for her receipt, which she'd already told you she had. I didn't know what she was reaching for. Reyes sighed. Officer Paulson, I've watched the body cam footage multiple times. At no point did Miss Price make any sudden movements. At no point did she resist. At no point did she give you any reason to believe she was a threat. Yet you handcuffed her, searched her, and arrested her. Why? Paulson was silent for a long moment. We had a job to do, he said finally. Your job is to protect and serve. Your job is to investigate crimes with a presumption of innocence until evidence proves otherwise. Your job is not to profile elderly women and arrest them because you can't admit you made a mistake. I didn't profile anyone. Then explain to me how you justify detaining a woman who had clear evidence of her innocence. Explain to me how you justify leaving her in a cell for 5 hours without water, without her medication, without even checking on her welfare. Paulson said nothing. Can you explain that, officer? Still nothing. Reyes closed her folder. You're suspended without pay, effective immediately, pending the outcome of this investigation. If the evidence supports what I believe it will, you'll be facing termination and possible criminal charges for civil rights violations. Paulson's face went pale. You can't. I can, and I am. 3 weeks later, Eleanor Price sat in a small conference room at a law office downtown. Across from her sat attorney Rachel Townsend, a civil rights lawyer who had taken Eleanor's case pro bono after seeing the news coverage. "The settlement offer came through this morning," Rachel said, sliding a folder across the table. "It's substantial, enough to cover all medical expenses, emotional distress, legal fees, and punitive damages. They're also agreeing to implement mandatory bias training for all officers, a complete review of arrest and detention protocols, external oversight of the department for the next 2 years, and a public apology." Eleanor opened the folder and looked at the number. It was indeed substantial, far more money than she'd ever expected to see. "And the officers?" she asked quietly. "Officer Paulson has been terminated. Officer Kendrick received a formal reprimand and is on probation for 1 year. If he steps out of line again, he's done. Lieutenant Simmons has announced his early retirement." Eleanor nodded slowly. "Is that enough?" Rachel looked at her with sympathy. "Is it ever?" They sat in silence for a moment. "There's something else," Rachel said. "The teen who filmed the arrest, he posted the video online. It's been viewed over 2 million times. News outlets have picked it up. People are angry. They're organizing. There's going to be a town hall next week to discuss police accountability." Eleanor felt something shift in her chest. Not quite healing. That would take time. But something close to it. "Good," she said softly. "Maybe something good can come from this after all." 6 months later, the Riverside Police Department looked very different. New policies were in place. Every arrest, no matter how minor, now required supervisor approval. Every detention longer than 2 hours required a welfare check and documentation. Every use of force, even handcuffing, required written justification that would be reviewed by an independent civilian oversight board. It wasn't perfect. It wouldn't solve everything. But it was a start. Officer Derek Paulson was gone. He'd moved to another state, tried to join another force, but the termination followed him. Sometimes, late at night, he still thought about the elderly woman in the parking lot and wondered if he'd ever really understood the weight of the power he'd been given. Officer James Kendrick stayed on the force. He completed the bias training, really completed it, not just showed up and signed the form. He read books about implicit bias. He attended community meetings. He tried, in his own fumbling way, to do better. Whether he succeeded was a question he asked himself every time he put on his uniform. And Eleanor Price? She went back to her quiet life. Her Thursday grocery trips, though she changed stores, unable to face the parking lot where it had happened. Her Sunday phone calls with Maya. Her garden, her church, her small routines that made up a full and meaningful existence. But she was different now, stronger, more certain, more willing to speak up when she saw injustice, even small ones. She had learned something that night in that cold cell, something she had always known intellectually, but now understood in her bones. Silence is complicity. Endurance is not the same as surrender. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to disappear. She had called her daughter that night, and in doing so, she had changed everything, not just for herself, but for every person who would come after her, every person who might sit in a cell and wonder if anyone cared, if anyone would come. Someone would come. Someone would always come. Because Eleanor Price had made sure of it.